Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, December 6, 2018 Traffic and Safety Board meeting. Call to order, roll call. Stoker?
Here.
Hang? Coda here. Samuel Moore?
Here.
Maureen Moore?
Here.
Chief Anderson?
Here.
Okay, next on the agenda is introductions of guests.
Well, I'm going to start off first thing and introduce my replacement. I invited Chief in Waiting, Scott Sarvello. He was sworn in at a council meeting. Scott will be taking over for me after the end of the month. So I'm very confident you guys will be in good hands, and he'll make sure that he can do all this copying for you as I do. So I don't know if you want to say anything, Scott, or anything.
Just hello, and look forward to working with everyone. I know most of you, everyone but Pam, really, I've known for a number of years. So.
Okay.
Welcome.
Well, we'd like to say welcome to you.
Thank you.
We're a pretty good group. I actually would like to say that after reading what your overall goal for your department is, that hopefully we can be of help in that area, because we do deal, obviously, with the public quite a bit. And so that should fit in, I think, dovetail very nicely with what you're going to do. So
I look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other guests?
Pat Cawley with Transportation Improvement Association.
Thanks, Pat.
Oh, we're doing introductions. John Horton, Clawson Downtown Development Authority.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes of October 4th, 2018.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes of October 4th, 2018, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting minutes have been approved.
Madam Chair, I had a couple of items that I would like to have brought forth on the agenda that were late after this that I'd like to put on them. These are the two items. One in old, they're highlighted there in old business and new business.
Okay.
So.
And those go on top. Okay. Next is old business. Item A, I don't know if you guys saw a copy of it or not, would be Traffic and Safety Board ordinance language for review. And copies were provided. I don't know if it's on your guys' new one.
I don't think they have the copy of that.
No, our first one would have been engine braking.
That one right there. Do you guys want to keep that as A for under this new one, or do you guys want to move it down towards the bottom?
Why don't we move that down?
Down, okay. So that will become F. Okay, so A would be engine braking.
And then under new business, I have that one on the top here too, right? 14 Mile Road. That's what Joan Horton is
Okay.
here for to discuss.
And then under new business, B would be 14 Mile and Main Street pedestrian study to add to the agenda.
Do you need a motion and so forth?
Motion to add these onto the agenda? Okay. Is there a motion to add item F for old business traffic and safety board ordinance linkage for review? And then a motion for under new business, add item B, 14 Mile and Main Street pedestrian study.
I'll make a motion to do that.
I'll second it.
All those in favor of adding those two items onto the agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion has passed. Old business A, engine braking.
Madam Chair, I gave everyone a copy of some language that I just received from John Kingsup for the engine braking ordinance. Everybody should have a copy of that. If not, I have a couple of extras here. He requested that I bring it before the board to look over and see if we can provide him with some feedback on that. I apologize for not getting it to you sooner, but I got it late, so.
So this, this is for us to take home and decide upon, or to
We can,
think about?
we can do it that way, or if you want to look at it and discuss it here, it's, that's, I know, with this topic, we could probably, have some discussion, but basically, I had provided Mr. Kingsup with some sample ordinances that I found from actually other states that were dealing with the engine braking issue that we had. The key ones that we wanted to get, really get into the meat of tonight would be the Traffic and Safety Board ordinance, to see if we can get that, because we'd like to get that scheduled for the next council meeting. As well as the,
Chief, can I, so just quickly rushing through this then, basically our ordinance, we're going to have an ordinance that's going to restrict the use of mechanical braking in the city of Clawson?
yes.
Okay.
And then for the section for the signs, that would just be at near the city limits of entering in at major streets?
Correct. It would
Okay.
be coming into the city, like, the law states that if you have a citywide ordinance, if you post it at the outskirts of town for a traffic regulation, you don't have to put signs all through the city. You just have to have, like our 2 to 6 parking ordinance, where we post it as there's a citywide ordinance prohibiting it.
So this can be, so if I understand it, this can be a civil infraction or an ordinance violation?
That's what it would probably go along with, and I'd have to work into the weeds with Mr. Kingsup as far as at what level. I would assume that it would be repeat violations would be elevated to a misdemeanor version.
So this is actually what we asked the council for?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't have to do anything more about it then?
No, this was developed by Mr. Kingsup as I provided all of the, I've supplied the board with all the reports that I sent to them requesting, making the requests from this board to adopt such an ordinance. And this is the result of what we got here from Mr. Kingsup.
Well,
And again, with it being here as late as it, if you would like to, put it on and keep it and digest it a little bit, make your suggestions, I would say that would be fine also, but
Now, for this, we would just be giving a recommendation to city council if there's any modifications or revisions.
Or when Mr. Kingsup would like the feedback, if there's any concerns that this board has, since this board brought it forward to him, so that he could address it before he brought the ordinance in front of council for approval.
Okay. Any discussions?
I guess I'm just not real clear on the penalty section of this thing. So at the discretion of the enforcement officer or the complainant, are we saying that the complainant could then bring us some sort of civil action against the truck driver? Is that?
No, it's not uncommon for violations, but generally it's, and I can bring that concern up to Mr. Kingsup to kind of clarify that. But generally, as far as ordinances, they're stair-stepped up from, first-time violations or the degree of a violation, whether it's a lower one. But most of the time, they would start off with a lower one and then repeat offenders, or if someone has something on their record for the same type of violation, than it could be, but that would have to be, that was a good catch there, and we can bring that up to him and have him clarify that.
Yeah, because I'm just concerned about the complainant. How does that work? How does the complainant determine whether it's a civil infraction or an ordinance violation? I just think we need some.
Clarity of the language.
Yeah, I would like to see a little bit of explanation or clarity on the penalties phase. Other than that, I didn't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
And I can do that, I can get a hold of him and relay that to everybody for
Okay, other than
where
that,
it
it's
is.
fine with me.
You want to make a motion, or?
We don't have to. We did already. We sent it to them, and they're responding with this, telling us that this was how it would read. Am I correct?
This board's voted to adopt an ordinance
Right.
already that is part of, that's what kind of, the next stage, this was the next level. It's just kind of coming back to us, to this board for review and just to give feedback after Mr. Kingsepp came up with, but since this
Okay.
board, came up with ideas of what we wanted and heard our complaints, the resident who complained and such, they wanted this board to review it and give any feedback,
Okay.
so.
And we're going to do that, so we should be good.
Okay. Any other discussions on this item?
No.
Okay, so clarify that.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Next on the agenda is item B, Charlevoix and Main Street.
I still have my sheet here. Yeah, I had, Mr.,
You need that?
that's what I wanted.
Okay.
There. Mr. Cawley's here, and I'm not sure whether Pat has anything to, on that intersection or not. He was coming tonight, so I wanted it to be on the agenda for him to.
Yeah, I can talk about it again. I apologize, I didn't have anything written up yet. Again, last time we met, I was collecting some more data. We got the side street traffic volume data, which is what I was looking at, because usually what you want to look at is if that level drops low enough, then you can put it into flash mode. The way it's operating now, it's probably, running longer than it needs to. The side street volumes are very low. But what I will recommend, like we had talked about, is probably running that signal in full actuation for a longer period. It won't, have Main Street turn red unless there's side street traffic there, and have it run in coordinated operation during the peak hours, and then just have it operate free in the off-peak hours. And then, it'd be, a choice of whether you wanted to have it run flash at all, but probably 10 o'clock at night, you'd probably want it to go back to flash because the volumes really drop off when you get past 9 p.m. at night.
And we discovered that we could have it in both modes, right? So that it can be active to be in sync with 14 and Main for the peak time, so that we're not having backups.
Yeah. I think what had occurred, years ago, I think there was a detection issue, which then it was cycling every time, even if a vehicle wasn't there, because the detection was out. That's what it defaults to. So I think that's what generated the original complaints, whenever that was 3 or 4 years ago. And then the other fear is if you have it in coordinated phase all that time, if a pedestrian does come up and push the button and they have to wait for coordination to come around, they might be standing there for a long time, eventually ignore it and cross without using the signal. So that's why I'd recommend going to this free mode during the off-peak hours, and then it'll give it more like a hot response, where when they push the pedestrian push button, it'll come up faster.
So if it's set for certain peak hours back in timed with 14 and Main, that would seem like that would give us the same problem as we had before. Because one of the frustrations was in like rush hour, when people would come out there, they'd be waiting forever because it would get into the cycle time. And then they'd wait and wait and wait for long periods of time, and then they go forward. But we probably need that with, as far as to make sure we don't have the backups on Main Street then, correct?
Correct. Okay. Yeah. should clear it. You're probably going to have to run, again, a long cycle because you're going to have to match what's going on at 14 in Main. Unless you have it so it works out where you can run it in a half cycle. If you have a short enough cycle at Charlevoix and Walper, you could run it, say, to run a 60-second cycle, well, 14 in Main's running 120, and then it would still stay in sync, but you may not be able to fit everything in that 60 seconds.
That's with crossing time and everything like that for a pedestrian, would that be what
Yeah,
the result?
yeah, and
Okay.
that's usually what's going to drive it is you're going to need more time for the pedestrian to cross than you will to accommodate the vehicles, so.
Unless we only have fast pedestrians.
Not with the school crossing there, so.
So the problem is that the pedestrians would come up to the intersection and want to activate the push button to cross, and they couldn't because the light was in flashing mode and whatever. So what you're suggesting is that's going to change that, so anytime a pedestrian comes up, they would be able to operate the crosswalk thing?
Yeah, if you wanted to run it, 24/7, you could. I think you might want to, run it in flash still in some time, but we would push that out, so it'd be later at night. It seemed like some of the desire was to have that operational, on summer nights, maybe till 10 o'clock, and that's really when you do see the volumes drop off, 9, 10 o'clock. The
Well,
side
that's
street volume gets really low.
That's the complaint we kept getting back to us, was the fact that this thing doesn't work. I go up and I want to push the button, and I do, and it doesn't do anything. And so the premises here is that we want to have that, for the pedestrian, that push button working so that they can cross, when they're there. And as long as we can do that, I certainly understand, say after 10 o'clock at night, you're not going to have too many pedestrians there. But basically during the day, they need to be able to operate that thing. That was always the biggest complaint we had.
Yeah, and the way I envision it, then you could have, if you had a pedestrian flow at noon, it'd be running in that off-peak, so it'd be more of the hot response. They'd come up, push it. They'd probably get a walk signal, in 4 to 5 seconds instead of maybe standing there for a minute waiting for it to come around.
This sounds like it's going to be a good solution, I think, down there, so.
I think so.
Yeah.
I
it
do.
sounds
I was
like it.
happy to hear that he could split that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, that's.
Now, what would be the PM peak hours then?
I'm not sure on the Main Street part. I would assume you'd probably run that like 4 to 6.
Okay.
So it'd be in coordination, and that way you'd still have the school
School
time would
crossing.
still get that hot response.
Okay, that's what I was wondering about, the school crossing time, if it
Yeah.
would be during the peak or prior to that.
Yeah, right now it's 7 to 9 and 3 to 5 is what it is right now.
And there was one, something that had come up, and maybe, actually, maybe Joan, now that she's here tonight, but I thought it was with the DDA, maybe not, but, and there was something about the fact that that light and the 14-mile light were in sync. They were working together, and there was some kind of an issue with that, and I don't remember exactly what it was, because I brought that up at the last meeting that we had and said, is this going to be a problem, another problem on top of what we already have with that intersection?
That's where I had invited Joan tonight to discuss that. And we have
Oh.
the other report that you have is dealing with the PED crossings at 14 in Maine.
Oh, okay,
So you have that, and we will discuss that.
fine.
That was one of the new items that I had on there, because,
You read my mind.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other discussions on Charlevoix and Main Street?
Do we need to make a motion to go with his?
Well, we haven't gotten, received
We
the
should probably
report
get the
yet.
report before we go forward to make a motion to accept the report, just
Okay.
because you're going to have to get into the weeds about dealing with the hours that you think it should be and everything, but I know it's a work in progress for Pat, so.
Yeah, and I think I'll probably have to circle back with Rachel Jones at the Road Commission. That's who went out there with us this fall and took a look at it. And it seemed like everything we are discussing is feasible with the equipment that's there, so.
Great.
Okay.
Any other discussions on this item?
No.
Okay, thanks.
So this stays on our,
This will
This will
stay.
stay on the hot list. so,
Okay.
okay.
As wanted by the board until it's resolved, so.
I will circle it to remember it. Next on the agenda is item C, special needs sign.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I gave you guys a copy of the special needs sign policy and the application. That was approved by council to go in effect, but Mr. Kingsup, and council had a couple of things that we tweaked in it, but it was approved with those. But Mr. Kingsup, if you recall, in my report to this board, is that he wanted to add some language in our ordinance, which is going to be, that's why I put that first, and then you guys moved it to the end. But it's going to be in there. There's a last bit of, the last section in there is addressing it on 7865, which is objectives and duties of the board. He just wanted it addressed to say what this board's participation is going to be, and as part of the ordinance, he wanted this board's function, and as you can see, number 7865 of the proposed language ordinance change, objectives and duties, number subsection 8 of the with the proposed language, act upon all requests necessitating special signage upon receipt of a complaint request for such language. I've got word into Mr. Kingsup to see if that's all he wanted to, if all he wanted to tweak in that. But when he got my report, that's what I got, was that little section saying that, and that would be going to, it would be just put at the end of our proposed language change in the ordinance language. So I guess the long and short of it is the policy and application are ready to go as long as everything else is, and that would come according to when the Traffic and Safety Board ordinance language is adopted.
Okay, so the special needs sign policy has been adopted, but
That was adopted by resolution of council.
Okay, and to make sure that goes in effect, the ordinance update needs to go forward and be approved?
Yes.
Okay. So it's just confirming the circle process?
Yeah, I kind of circled back, but that was a holdup that Mr. Kingsup said he wanted that in place before it was adopted to formally state what this board's duty is in making the recommendation to council. So as you know, with the actually it says it in the policy of how it addresses it, how the applicant that application would first come to this board for a recommendation that would go to council for final approval, but this board would give a recommendation for the special needs sign.
But he wants to write a little more about
I
that.
believe that's all it is that I incorporated there, but he's been a little stretched these days, so it's, I'm not really sure.
Okay, it's, nor are we. What I'm wondering what he means by act upon as opposed to anything else in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, which are basically reviewing, and providing.
I think he's addressing the specials, again, it's his legal-esque language here. I believe he's just addressing special signage here as that.
If you look at number 2, Chief, recommend to the city council ways and means for improving traffic conditions, okay? Everything else
But-
is,
but in-
everything that we do is a recommend, the results of whatever we do, as I understand everything that our ordinance covers and whatever, is basically, we're reviewing things, we're making recommendations to the city council,
Yes.
period.
Yep.
That's what we do. So what does act
Well,
upon?
number two, if you look at it, recommend to city council ways and means for improving traffic conditions. I guess that could, but I think he was trying to be more specific with saying special needs. I don't know. He's the one that told me that he wanted to do something, and that's what he sent me, was that.
I mean, I know that he's very concerned about this issue.
Well, he wants to make sure that there's a process in place, and that in the case that somebody is denied the sign would be, you want to make sure that you have, everybody is treated fairly and under the same, that was council's concern, was that we're not giving, saying, yes, this person can have a sign, but no, this person can't for whatever reason. They want to make sure that, and that's why we went into more detail in the policy and the application to try to have them specify why do they say they need that sign. And I think that's all Mr. Kingsep's concern, is that there's language in place addressing that and showing that this board is taking that into consideration and justifiably through ordinance. I'm guessing, I'm not Mr. Kingsep, but that's what he asked that he gave me to bring forward to this board. So if you have concerns about it, then we can get into it a little more.
Well, I mean,
I wonder if the word act upon, instead of
Yeah.
saying review and recommend all requests necessitating special
well,
signage.
we normally, based on everything else that we do on this board, we do not have any authority. This is a non-authoritarian board. So is this giving us some authority to say, for example, refuse someone?
I would.
Or do we have to say, that's our recommendation,
Well,
and we pass that forward to the council?
According to the new policy, you could reject those persons, and that's probably why he says that, because then the
Okay.
council is a fallback for them to say, for someone to go in to challenge what this board has said. So the council then would act as, they can, what's the word I want? They can take that action of this board and go
an
forward to the appeal. It's an appeal process to the council, so that the council can still see that. And that may be why he's using this, act upon, because it's giving this board, I mean, if it's a negative, there's nothing for council to approve, right? I mean, by
Well, are we allowed, and that is the question. And I don't mean to really mince things here, but I do want to stay clear, because we've been told over and over and over again about we have no authority. So the question comes in, when you say that, if it's a negative, there is nothing for the council to approve, are we the people that are going to give the negative? Which is an authority then.
yes.
But we're going to give the negative in his form that he has told us we can. In other words, I think his concern is he wants it clear when it can be and when it can't be. And we're going to have to stay within that.
Well, I understand that. I'm just wanting this act upon to be clear as to what that means, because it's nowhere else. We recommend.
Yeah, well.
Well, you would be you're not telling somebody that they can have a sign. You're recommending to council that they get a sign.
Or not.
If there's a negative, there's no need to have adopt by resolution for a traffic control device because there's nothing to recommend. But it allows council, that person to go to council
Right.
and say, those guys and gals on that traffic and safety board said I shouldn't, and I think I should have. And it's always it's going to be council's call either way. But council then would get that information, the negative, if they were going to appeal it, this board then would be clear in why they're denying that request.
Right.
And then that would become, information for the council to act upon to either say as the seers of the appeal, it would give them information then to say, well, I think that this wasn't, and I guess they could even send it back to this group to come up with a positive. I don't know. This is all new for everybody. But I think that's why he said act upon for that.
Okay.
That's what I asked John for, his legal language there, so.
Yeah. Well, I would just like if you,
We want to get some clarification on that then.
I would like to get some clarification anyways. I don't know about the rest of the board, but I would like to have some. Just because it's out of step with everything else we do.
Okay, so it would be clarification of what he means by act upon.
Yes.
I can get that back to the board then.
Okay.
Any other discussions on this item? That was kind of a combination of item C, special needs signs, and new item F, traffic and safety board ordinance. Okay, next on the agenda is item D, under old business, Madison and Custard.
Yes, we have, I gave to everybody a copy of Pat's. If you recall, we had citizens' concern with Madison and Custer and the design and the offset of it being kind of a difficult intersection. And the complaints were that there were near misses there at the intersection. You have the copy of Pat's draft report. Pat, would you like to come up and talk about your report?
I didn't have the first one really.
Do you have that copy? I have it here for you guys to have. My scribe didn't get it out.
Look at yours and see if you have it.
No, I don't have that. Okay.
Oh,
There, he's got it.
there you guys go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I touched on this last meeting too. We were collecting data the last time we did meet, but just looking at the volumes, the way the signage is, it makes sense to keep the stop control the way it is. There's not high enough volumes or balanced enough volumes to do an all-way stop, which was the other thought that what could occur there. It seems appropriate the way it is with Madison having to stop, Custer being free flow. The offset there is a little bit concerning. It's usually you have those offset legs stop and not free flow like that, but the volumes really do bear out. It should be that way. The only issue I did see when I was out there, again, was if there's a parked vehicle there, then it's hard to see oncoming traffic. So I think it's important that, maybe have some beefed up no parking signs out there, particularly inside the intersection. And then it looks like the curbs are already marked, 30 feet from the stop sign, just to keep that whole area clear. And then, what I recommended was adding the cross traffic does not stop, so nobody's confused and thinks that Custer is going to stop for them.
So that would be the adage of the sign that the resident requested, which is similar to the sign that we have up at Phillips in Washington, and that seemed to help there, actually. It gave some
Yeah.
clarification.
Yeah.
When people know that the cross traffic's not going to stop, so they're not pulling out in front of somebody. And then add the no parking to kind of clear that intersection, so.
Any discussion on this item?
Or do we need to make a motion?
I'd like to have it so that we could have, go for approval of a traffic control order for all of this and have it all put forward to council. So.
Do you need both the cross-traffic sign installation and
Well,
no
the
parking
no
sign?
parking's not, are you just saying the signs just to reinforce what the law already says?
Yeah, just to clear that, particularly the intersection proper there in between the offsets, because that first time I went out there was a vehicle parked right there, and then westbound direction, you would have difficulty seeing Custer traffic, so.
Yeah, so it wouldn't need a resolution and a traffic control order to just add a sign to tell people, because that's just advisory.
Okay.
In nature, and this, if we were adding additional no parking signs that would be over and above what the law already says, you don't need to have a traffic control order to say that you need signage that's just reinforcing an existing law that's already there. It's just correct, Pat, with that.
Yeah, actually, for that part there, the way it's written in the vehicle code, it actually says no signs are required, but this would just be, again, just to reinforce it so people know.
Okay.
So I guess if we could have a motion just to approve it from the board, then we'll go forward from there. It won't have to go forward for a traffic control order.
Okay.
But
Okay, then I would like to make a motion to go forth with Pat's recommendations for the corner of Madison and Custer.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor of going forward with the recommendations from TIA on the intersection of Madison and Custard, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion has passed. Next on the agenda is, under old business, is item E, prohibited truck turns.
yeah, and this was on the last schedule. I just wanted to report that the signs are up, and it seems that people are following it. I know our guys have made a couple of stops with it, but just my own observations down there, it looks like the trucks are getting used to it and not turning there. So that's all I had to add, that it's just one more that we can take off of of our agenda.
Okay, any other discussions on that item? And then we already discussed F, correct? That was added on the agenda, the traffic and safety ordinance.
Yeah, and
To
that's,
correlate
that
with-
one, just to clarify with that, we want clarification on the act upon before this board recommends to go forward with that language change. Because this language was the proposed language that would go into a new ordinance that would be approved
Now, when was that planning to go?
next council meeting. But
And-
if it's not ready to go, if this board's not going to approve it, then we're not going to, I won't put it have it put on the agenda.
Because when's the next council meeting?
2 weeks from this last Tuesday.
Tuesday, okay.
It's a voice from above. So that's why I brought it forward for approval, but we kind of got into it with the other deals, so.
Okay.
We can hold off on it. I'll just say that you had questions about it. and-
It kind of comes back to what we discussed about the Traffic and Safety Board ordinance update about under section 7865,
This is a s-
item
the only thing
B
that's new
or
in
eight.
that, the only thing that's new in that language from my last report that was kind of summarizing what this board wanted is the addition of that number 8 that Sam has a question about. And that was by John Kingsup. That was all that was added to this. This was all the same way as it was, incorporating everything that the board wanted to have in the new ordinance change.
Okay.
So,
And I guess the discussion is do we see if we do we want a clarification of the first words act upon before going forward through city council, to the city council meeting?
Say that again?
So the new item underneath, it'd be 8, kind of what we discussed with the special sign, the special needs sign, that we would need to agree or make a motion to add item 8 underneath proposed language on the second sheet of act upon all requests necessitating special signage upon receipt of a complaint request for such language. So if we present a motion today saying we agree with that wordage, it would go to the city council, correct me if I'm wrong, to the city council meeting in 2 weeks. But if we want a clarification of what act upon means, then it'll probably go the middle or, the second
It'll
meeting in
be after our
January.
next meeting then.
Well, I
'cause we'll-
think, couldn't we,
No.
we can't?
No, have them approve it with.
Well, I was going to say,
conditions.
yeah, I don't think,
I think what he means by act upon all requests is what we normally do. So if someone comes in and complains, or if they want a sign, then we have to fill out the information for the sign and then pass it on to council, is what it sounds like to me.
And I wonder if those words essentially correlate, so that way the application does come to us versus comes to, or gets reviewed by someone else in the city or a different board or commission, so to speak.
And that's what he had said before when he told me to hold off. He wanted to have it in the ordinance saying what this board, the part that this board would take with the special needs signs. So,
okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is that basically he's just wanting to make sure that when that comes before this board, that we will take it up and review all the stuff that we have to review in the application itself, and then I guess we're making a recommendation if it goes forward, or?
That's what
or-
it sounds like.
Or
either,
could you say
you
yes?
could, it could die with this board.
Well, it can die before it
with-
gets to us. When they
Yeah, it could
fill it out
die
and
at
give
this
it to the
board,
police
but then he also
department.
gave
Has the
the
right to
council
appeal.
as a right to appeal to
Right.
council
Yeah.
with that decision.
Right.
So what that is doing is it's clarifying that this board can deny that request. But I think that this board also needs to put it in writing, and if a request comes forward, we need to have a report sent to council saying, this topic came forward to this board, this request. It was, these are the facts that were laid out by the person. These are the reasons that this board says, no, we don't think that this meets the qualifications. The whole thing, the council was really concerned about having the signs go up that aren't really needed, and the fact that there would be someone that would be disparaged from this because it's not fair for one person to get it under the same circumstances, yet your neighbor comes forward and you're going to give them a sign, and somebody else, maybe not that simple, but someone with the same set of facts.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, you're going to have a lot of people with a lot of different ailments and reasons coming forward that want the signs. I would imagine, anyhow. That would be my best guess. And it would be up to this board to kind of sift through those. And
Well,
take,
it kind of looks like it's the police department's job to do that, if you read this correctly. And that the-
it's the police department's job to do some homework with it, and to also consult with the signage for the engineers through TIA. This is what we're doing. Work with the DPW to talk about, is the placement of this sign able to be placed in a certain place. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of homework that you do before it comes to this board, is what.
Right.
And it's all based on, like anything else, so really, that comes before this board, that starts off with a complaint, and it goes forward, and you get the report, and you can dig into it once it comes here and ask those questions.
Okey dokey. need a motion? Is that what you're looking for?
Well, I don't know what you want to do. You tell me. I'm just, you had questions, and I, don't- you know, if, I mean, it's, if there's questions, and we can get it clarified, and it'll just be delayed and not be ready for the next council meeting.
I agree, if they have a question, they should get it answered before they vote.
Okay, then that,
Myself.
then we can do that, and I can have Mr. Kingsep try to put that into an explanation form for how he sees this going down and the reason that he has this language,
Wait,
and present it to and I can present it to you guys.
you know, because I thought, when I watched the city council meeting, at the time that this was brought up, and there was discussion on the council, that it sounded to me like, you know, one of the things that was going to happen was that he wanted to make sure, John, wanted to make sure that, you know, the Traffic and Safety Board knew what their role was and what they had to do, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought he was going to come before the board and, you know, we would have almost like a workshop and discuss, this is the application, this is the kind of questions you ask, this is the kind of things you do. I thought it was going to be a little bit more involved than that, and that, I guess that's why I'm questioning that number 8, act upon, because I thought that was what was going to happen, and apparently it's not going to happen, so I want to know what act upon then means. I still want to know that.
Okay, well, we can do that then. We'll just not have a motion, and we can carry it on to the next time we discuss it.
Sorry. Sorry to
Say
my
sorry
fellow
to
board
Chief
member.
Sarvello, because it'll be in his lap then.
That's fine.
It'll just stay underneath, stay underneath old business, no big deal. Okay, so just a clarification of act upon,
I mean,
clarification on that, and then.
That's really the only thing that has a major change. We initiated all the other changes to begin with, so I'm fine with everything but number 8,
Okay.
Which is the only thing that was added.
which was the only thing that was added.
Okay, and just
But we did-
clarification on the first two
We
words.
did make changes to the policy, though, to kind of really, after our discussion here, we made changes,
Yes.
kind of really clarifying it, where I think the policy pretty much goes down and says how the process is going to work. I gave you a copy of the policy.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do remember reading through all of that too, and it was quite detailed, you know, a lot of stuff to do. But I thought, and maybe I'm wrong, I mean, maybe I just assumed that John was going to, you know, come before us and say, you know, I want to make sure you folks know what your role is in this new endeavor, and that you will have some responsibilities here that are going to, you know, have some major impact, and you can make those decisions. That's what it sounds like to me. So that is a major change in our board's operation.
right, and that's why I think John wanted to add that into the language of the
Yeah.
ordinance, because it then is a change, and it is recognizing that this board takes an active part in determining these.
Right. And I do agree with that. I think that's what's happening. But, so anyways, that's my.
I'll report to John the concerns and see if I would, who knows whether he'd come to a meeting or not.
Well-
But at least, if anything, I'll have him have a narrative anyhow, kind of explaining the way.
Yeah, he may say, well, I never intended to do that. I don't know where he got that idea, but, you know, that's what he does.
Right.
So don't use my name. But I think you see what I'm going after is the fact that I thought, because this was a major change for the city, really, as to what we're doing. This is a big policy change in going after these signs and the fact that we're going to, we're cautioning people that, you got to show your medical records and the people on the board, will be exposed to your medical records and blah, 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 HEPA and all that kind of stuff. So it's a big deal. And so I just want to make sure of what he is saying here before I get him coming down my back saying, well, by God, why did you do that? Why did you say that,
But this board has had cases where they haven't gone forward with recommendations that people come forward to this board that want something.
Right.
So you're in essence denying their request. I mean, heck, how many times do we have somebody that says, I want a stop sign put here to stop speeding in my neighborhood? Or how many times do we've dealt with an intersection on a regular basis and they want something else, and this board says, well, no, we've dealt with it before, sorry, your request is denied. That's not something that, so that's really, this board has always done that, at least since I've been part of it, where it's kind of denied somebody's request, and that would kind of be doing the same thing for this, although this would be a whole lot greater detail.
Yeah.
But it's not like this board has never denied somebody's request for something. It's just died here. It hasn't gone forward.
Right, but in what you say is that the detail and the steps that they have to go through, we have to go through, everybody's got to go through, it's a lot more.
And it's gonna have the potential to be a little more of a hot item, because people are gonna be very passionate about
Yes.
this request for a sign. And people are passionate about their needs and their beliefs that they need something. And so I could see where it would be best to have it clarified what this board's role is, because if you're denying somebody, I think it's this board's obligation to give council the ammunition that they can, at least most intelligently, back this board's decision up, or say, well, you know what, I think this board is wrong, and we're going to give them their sign anyhow. But at least they have this board's.
Well, we made two decisions to go forward, and the council, one was the parking on the street, if you recall that one. And I forget what the other one was. There was something else there. And the board agreed, or the council then agreed, we sent our recommendation to the council, and the council said yay on one and nay on the other.
Right.
So they can do that.
They can do that. They can do, like I said, they can do that with this special needs sign.
But we
Even if
didn't
this
go
board-
through.
But that's why it's addressed in the policy that they have a right of appeal to council. So
Yes.
because council, and you're telling them that they have a right to appeal to council. So they're not leaving here thinking that they've been, because they do have that right to appeal, because the council is going to make the ultimate decision on it.
And I think the difference between this one is this application, at least an application says Traffic and Safety Board denial date. A lot of times we necessarily, if there's a complaint or something come forward, it dies. It doesn't, it doesn't go forward. We necessarily don't deny it. We just don't act upon it. I think this is a little bit different where we're actually stating and voting to deny something.
Right. This is a change. So I don't think that's that big a deal to ask him, what do you mean? Personally.
Okay, any more discussions on F, Traffic and Safety, Board ordinances, updates? No. Okay, on to new business. Item A, Main Street speed.
Yeah, I just wanted to report to the board that, I don't know if you have noticed, I think you guys got a copy of this the last time, with Scott Vurick gave you guys some information. Royal Oak, with their remodeling of Main Street, they put in their bicycle lanes, they have changed their speed to 25 in the whole zone there. And we received a request to bag our 35 signs so that we just continue a 25 all the way through the city. And my response to Royal Oak was that if you show us a traffic study that gives reason for why you made that a 25 zone, then we'll be willing to change our 35. And I said, well, why don't you guys take your 25 zone down until you do a traffic study and then make it a 25. So, I just wanted to keep this board posted that in case somebody comes up and says, it's confusing, because right now you're going from a 25 to a 35
Then
to a
to a
25. But in the case that their speed study says that it's 25, then we could then change our 35 because we're going in a short distance from 25 to 35 to 20. That just doesn't make sense to do that up and down. It's confusing to motorists. But right now, I talked to Pat about it, and I think we're on pretty good standing by leaving ours that was based on a traffic study up until they can resolve what they want to do down there. So that's where I wanted to just keep this board posted, that was my response to them, was that we're going to leave our 35 and go forward if we need to at a later date.
Okay, so there's not like an end date that they'll provide a traffic study in the next month or two? It's just whenever they...
No, that's just whenever, when they can supply that. That's what
Okay.
my response was, is, let us know that, and we'll work then. I'll bring that, somebody will bring that forward to you guys.
Did they agree to do that? Did they agree to do a traffic study? They did? Oh, good.
So anyhow.
You shouldn't have helped him out.
Well, the last time I talked to Pat, it was kind of up in the air, so.
I'm thinking
But I
Pat's
saw,
doing another traffic study.
I saw the hoses that I'm assuming are TIA's hoses out there doing traffic counts and stuff and speed counts and stuff. So I'm sure they want to have this resolved too, but I just didn't want to bag our signs that are based on a traffic study. I didn't see us doing that, so.
And I have a quick question. I've only driven it once, and that was southbound. If you're coming northbound on 13 Mile Road, does it stay one lane all the way through now? Or does it go to 2 lanes and then reduce back down to 1?
No, it stays a bike lane and a road. They did do a reconfiguration at 13 and Main.
Yeah.
Because it was actually putting, the way they had the lanes, it was going to be like a head-on collision, the way they had the lanes going around, but they did straighten that up.
Okay.
So it goes all the way down to actually Catalpa way, and it comes up with a bike lane, a dedicated bike lane, a left turn lane, and then northbound, southbound.
Okay, and if you're going from 13 Mile Road northbound, there's 1 lane and then the bike lane, then what happens to the city limits in Clawson? Is it still 1 lane all the way through downtown?
We marked with the white lanes, giving us more parking down there.
Okay,
So that it would kind of, how effective that is or not. I know when we first put the lines up, if you guys remember before we did the bump outs on Main Street, South Main, people were just driving right down that lane until you put something solid in front of them. And then they launch until they get used to it, which all those islands that Royal Oaks got put on, all their signs are all twisted and everything all over the place. So, but we went through the same thing, those same growing pains until people realize that there is land in front of them.
okay, so it doesn't go out back
No,
out
they
to 2 lanes, and then
before it got cold, they tried to have the striping to continue it as 1 lane with a parking lane.
Okay.
So they brought that parking further down Main Street.
Okay,
Down in front of the Church of Clawson and everything, that's all parking now along there where it used to not be.
yeah, it used to be open up to 2 lanes and then reduced down to 1. Okay.
I still hear confusion about, what's that green thing there? What am I supposed to do with that?
Those are areas of conflict.
Conflict, yeah. I heard that.
Okay, any other discussion on item A, Main Street speed? Okay, next under new agenda that was added is called?
14 Mile and Main pedestrian study. That's what, each one of you should have a copy of that, as long as my scribe was good at giving those out. And then I have Joan Horton here from the DDA that was a request the last time we talked about it, was for Joan to kind of give you some background on kind of their thoughts about the 14 Mile and Main and talk about pedestrian and the vision. So, Joan, do you want to come on up and?
Okay, Harry, Chief Anderson said that there were some questions as to what the DDA was doing and that we had that we had a traffic consultant, and some of you have seen our newsletter where that's been brought up. So just to give you a little bit of background on what happened. Through Main Street, National Main Street Program, we get what is called a tech visit, which provides, when we identify what a pressing issue is that year, they provide us with a consultant, and which is paid for by Main Street for up to $5,000. So it assists our budget, it assists the city, and we can look at issues that, we would not have the budget to do. So I had talked to Chief Anderson earlier because we had identified 14 Mile in Maine as an issue that we'd like to look at to see what are the options for pedestrian safety. And would there be any problem with us hiring a consultant to look at that and then reviewing that, with TIA? And Chief Anderson, no, he had no problem. If it alleviates some, money problems for us all, then that was fine. So we did get Cheryl Gregory from Spalding D. Decker. And the two things that we wanted to look at for pedestrian safety were crosswalk markings. Were there any options to make those crosswalks stand out a little better, more noticeable so that people are aware, drivers are aware that there's pedestrians, that, this is the area we want to slow down. And again, for a little bit of beautification. So we looked at that. We also looked at addressing potential conflicts between pedestrian and vehicle traffic at that intersection. Because we've been down there, and I know I'll just say last year during Trick or Treasure, when there's all kinds of kids and all kinds of people walking, we had a very near miss with a car that going southbound on Main Street wanted to catch that left traffic light, and there was a couple with their two kids right there, and bam, I mean, we were standing there, and it was, so before we have the actual crashes in the data, what can be done to look at some of these things? So that's what we were doing. On the crosswalk markings, what we have found out is Cheryl working with Pat, agreed that first of all, she said it's too busy to do too much there. You've already got so much going on, you don't want to add in anything too busy. So what could we do? As long as the parallel markings were maintained, we could put something inside those markings as long as it didn't have writing on it. We were looking at maybe taking a template and doing paint to make it, using white paint, to make it look like brick. That was acceptable. So we've looked at a couple other options. PK Contracting, who does the striping for the city, could do it. It went into the tens of thousands of dollars, though, so it really was something that was not in anyone's budget. The other option is there's a company that does templates for road striping and road markings. They could make a template, lay it down, city would paint it, move the template, paint again. That's going to be something the city is going to have to decide if that's doable. Budget-wise, it is, but it's going to have to be redone. It's going to mean closing off a lane while that paint dries, moving it, closing the next lane. So, it seemed like, we haven't brought that up. It just seemed like, let's hold off on that and we can talk about it. The next issue was the timing of the lights, and is there anything that could be done to make it a little bit better for pedestrians that didn't have too bad of an impact on traffic, although I'd really prefer that the pedestrians come a little before the car. But so this is our consultant said, we can do those studies, but you have a contract with TIA and they can provide that. So let's wait and let them do that. And so that's where we are now. Pat has collected all the data and given a report, and there's one option that I think, and I haven't discussed it with our design committee yet, but I think there's one option of adding buttons for pedestrian so that it would just be activated. And all it does is it would give them a little extra time to cross when they press the button, so that they're a little further into the street, so that they're not stepping off the curb at the same time that person is trying to make that right on red. Makes them a little more noticeable, and the cars to see them. So that's an option, and that's in Pat's report. It seems that it's probably the best one. The others would impact the signal all the time to give that time to the pedestrian, which would have a greater impact on the traffic. So those are some of the things that we've been looking at, and that is why we did it. And now Pat's report is out, so we'll see where we go from here. And as far as Charlevoix, I don't know. Charlevoix was not in our purview. It's not in the DDA. Don't know.
And that's
Back to
what-
Pat.
And when I heard about that, that's when we brought that up to the chief and Pat and said, well, you know, the DDA is doing this thing on 14 Mile Road, and we're doing this thing on Charlevoix. And, you know, is there going to be an impact either way, is what we wanted to know and we're concerned about, because we're trying to do this, you guys were up here trying to do that, and, you know, we had to make sure that whatever we came up with was going to work for both scenarios.
Sure.
And that was the only reason why we brought that up, was the fact that we weren't sure what you guys were doing, and all I heard was, you know, you were doing something with the timing or something with the lights on 14, and it was like, holy smokes.
Just looking at the options. It all had to be coordinated with the city and with TIA. We just started the ball rolling with what are
Yeah.
some of the options and what, you know, what's plausible, what's not. So that was what we were doing. But it still has to coordinate with the city. Pat has to put his blessing on it, or TIA does, to say, these are the things that work. So
Okay.
that's where we are.
Very good.
Well, we appreciate you
Thank
coming.
you for
Thank
coming.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Pat, do you want to talk about your study?
Yeah, I'll give you the real quick rundown of what's in there. So, like Joan had said, they wanted to do something, and that's what we were trying to wrestle with and figure out what was best out there. So what I put in there is there's, you know, 3 different scenarios of what you could do to improve pedestrian crossings there. One would be just, you know, running the signal a little bit different where they're protected, so you don't have that conflict with the left turns. And it kind of operates that to some effect now. The phasing is flexible, so sometimes it does conflict with the pedestrian, sometimes it doesn't. But that's something you can do, and that's going to eliminate some exposure for, you know, the left turn conflict with a pedestrian on that opposite approach. The most severe one, which was what we first started talking about, was just doing exclusive pedestrian phase. That's where all vehicular traffic stops, all the pedestrians go. Usually when you do something that you got very heavy pedestrian flows, they're going to cross diagonally across the intersection, you know, and perpendicular, whichever way they want to go. Typically just see that in a really dense downtown. I mean, I've seen it in San Francisco, and Toronto is where I've actually seen it, and that's where, you know, you're having hundreds of pedestrians crossing every cycle. So that didn't seem like it fit there. And then the other technique you can use, which is something that's relatively new, it's been around for a while, but is picking up more steam, is called a leading pedestrian interval. And what that does is, like Joan said, it gives the pedestrian a little bit of a head start. So they're in the roadway, they establish themselves before the light turns green for the opposing traffic. And that would be really good, like the situation she mentioned with the left turner. That's a common issue where the A pillar of the car is going to block somebody seeing that crosswalk when they turn left. Once the pedestrian's out a lane or two, they're going to be visible. So it's a good technique to mitigate that. You do lose a little bit of efficiency because what you're going to do is you're going to have, 4 to 7 seconds where the vehicles are all stopped and the walk starts. So you're basically making the walk phase longer, and it's going to run everything a little bit more. But that's what I would recommend doing. Looking at the pedestrian volumes, they aren't huge, but what I did see is I went back and looked at the video that we took for the truck study, and I could see the conflicts. And rule of thumb is if you have, I think it's 20 or 25% of phases where you have a pedestrian conflict, this is a good tool to use, and that's what I did see out there. So the other thing we talked about is if you do this, then what you're going to want to do is put in push buttons, because to run it all the time would be pretty impactful. If you have pedestrian push buttons, then it's only in effect when the pedestrian pushes the button. If you do that, the other thing you could do is actually not only do that leading pedestrian interval, you could do the protected as well. So it give you a lot more flexibility as far as how you operate the signal. Following up on that, I had talked to Joan about, funding sources to get this done, and we could explore different things, safety funding perhaps, safe routes to school, or TAP funding, but it's probably going to have to be grouped with some other improvements to make it a sizable project.
It sounds like it, listening to it, if you see conflicts there, would be good to be proactive with it and try to start now working toward a goal of doing something to help the pedestrians there before we have someone get hurt.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just a matter of time if you have conflicts and near hits that you're going to have someone hit.
What's amazing is even today, after all that's been done on that intersection, people will cross in the middle of the block. You'll see them every day. They do that. They won't use the crosswalks. They don't use the lights or anything. It's always, they got to cross somewhere where it's nothing there. And it's like, what else can you do?
Yeah, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
It's like cattle.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Thanks, Pat.
Any other discussions on, what was it called again?
That 14 Mile and Main Street pedestrian study. So that's probably just a wait and see, see how it materializes. But I thought that with those questions, with us going down further, just to kind of, get some clarity to it, to see where the direction.
I really do appreciate, Joan, you coming in, because I'm a great believer in working together with other boards when you hear or you see something or you're going to attempt to do something and there's going to be impact of some sort, maybe just informational in some cases, other times it might be something different, but we let each other know that really, it goes a long way. As they say, communication's a big problem, and number one problem probably in almost every business that you can go to. So I do appreciate you coming in. I really do.
Okay, any other items underneath new business?
Well, I had a couple, but I do have one. I would like to just bring it up. No motions, I don't think tonight or anything else, but we do have a problem on this board when we fall below the threshold for a quorum and we can't have a meeting. That's a 2-month interval. And it's just as like you almost forget everything you were ready to discuss or talk about or whatever, because it's such a long period of time, and people who are coming before us get very upset because it's a long time. We say, well, you got to come to the next meeting. Well, when is that? Well, that's a month from now. It's like, well, so what I had a thought that, you know, what we maybe should try to do, and we don't have to put this in the ordinance or anything else, but I think this could be an agreement, would be to, if we have to miss a meeting because we don't have a quorum, that we try to, within that same month, we try to have, you'd have to call it a special meeting, I guess, at that point, so that we don't lose too much ground. I think it's really important that we kind of maintain as much as we can that rhythm of once a month, so that we don't get so far behind that it's like a big pileup of stuff. So I just wondered if the board members would consider that, and maybe we could have another discussion at our next meeting to see whether or not that's something everybody would be willing to do, or maybe not. I don't know, but I'm just throwing that out there because I think it's an awful long time to go between meetings.
And I think it's going to be helpful for have the ex officio be able to vote.
Yes, absolutely.
And with, if you're down, because there were a lot of meetings that we were just off of a quorum.
Yep.
And you're always going to have a representative from the police department here, because if the chief can't make it, there'll be a designee, somebody from afternoons or somebody representing the police department, which would be your ex officio. So with,
Well, in our thing, it says we only need 3 for a quorum.
In the new
ordinance, right.
And we have,
Yep.
and it's only 5 members
Yeah.
rather than 7.
yep. So I'm hopeful that that will change things.
It
Not
should.
that- not
Hopefully
that-
it will.
Not that, not that it's not helpful to have as many members as possible here, but at least that will help to at least get movement, keep movement of items.
Yeah, even with, I think the last meeting where we didn't have the quorum last month, we wouldn't have made it even with, because you were gone. Although your
I had Scott here,
representative
yeah,
that sat
I had
in could have done
somebody
that.
here
Yeah,
they could
that's
have-
true,
They could
it
have done
could
that,
have.
so.
Yeah.
Because it's recognized, or or the designee.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So maybe we would have made that threshold.
Yep.
And that may do away with my suggestion of, having a special meeting, but I think we need to talk about it anyways, and see, make sure that we're all on the same page of however we want to handle it.
And it might be dependent on the topic. If it's something that's urgent that needs to go, then of course you're going to want to have something like that. Not that all topics aren't important, but there are some that seem to be more pressing, time sensitive.
Well, I just remember the guy that was here about the jake breaking.
He
And
was
when
not a
he
happy
came,
camper.
and I said, I'm sorry, we're not going to have a meeting, we don't have a quorum. And he turned around, disgusted, and left. And we didn't see him again, and it's like, that shouldn't happen, really.
Yeah.
That really shouldn't. So that kind of spurred that discussion right there. I guess that's it for me. I shut my mouth.
Okay, any other items on new business? Any other comments or discussions at all?
Looks like Joan has something to say.
Before you adjourn, I guess I'd like to know, Harry, where, now that the study's done, what would be the next step? If it's going to be looking at funding sources, is whether it's a grant through, Safe Routes to School or whatever, or TAP funding, which, Pat said they could look into those sources. They might have to be grouped with something. It's going to take their involvement. Is that something that the police department will recommend? Would this board make a recommendation to council to go further with the study and explore options, or, because otherwise it's going to sit?
Right, and I think it would be in this board's, that's right in their wheelhouse here. This would be the board that would do that.
You could probably pass it forward to us if you wanted to do that.
Pass what forward? You've got the study. What would you like passed forward?
Well, the study originated with you and the DDA, correct?
Right, the request to
But
do
they have
these
the
studies,
way
yes.
to get money to do
And,
it.
and, right.
Well, see, the other thing is, I think, is our consultant could have looked for grant opportunities. That's something that could be done. This was last year's, it was last year's tech visit. We are out of that funding now,
Okay,
Oh,
because we're into this year's tech visit. That didn't get, because the study took, some time to complete, those things took time.
sure.
That I believe, I'm trying to see if we can get it back, but I think it's going to be hard to backpedal and ask for them to resubmit and give us that funding. So my question is, where does it go?
Because I'm just thinking out loud and Pat might help, for like Safe Route to Schools and TAP applications, usually has to be, I know Safe Route to Schools has to be an application joint with the city and hypothetically a school of Clawson Public Schools, Guardian Angels and such. So a motion would have to go forward through city council to be able to, so that you can include that information with the application for Safe Route to Schools or TAP, correct?
Yeah, and that's what I kind of talked with Joan this afternoon, just kind of bouncing around ideas. The way Safe Routes to School works is you really have to have a, kind of a grassroots committee at the school. They're going to go out and survey the surrounds of the school and say, these are the improvements we need. Might not end up being, exactly what you envision. So that's where you have to start at. And then, that in itself is usually an 18-month process to go through all that too, so.
I know that when we did the pedestrian islands and that project, that was TAP funding, but Safe Routes to School was also called into it because that is a crossing
For
for.
the schools.
Mm-hmm.
and you
So,
can't.
so it was so I don't think we got Safe Routes to School funding, but it was thrown into the application as this also applies, just to beef up the application a little.
But the other monies are gone now, and you would have to start all over, is that what you're saying, Joe?
I'm saying that for us to get a consultant to do the grant application or explore those fundings, that resource is probably, that time has passed. Yeah, because that fiscal year is gone. So
Well,
it would
I would
be,
say it would
it would
come
be
in.
TIA looking at those sources. If you believe that we do want to be proactive there, and this is something that should be considered, then I was just wondering if the recommendation was going to come from the PD, or the recommendation would come here, to bring it to council's attention, to say, we'd like to be proactive here.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
We could do that. We'd have to put it on an agenda, next agenda.
All right, we'll give it a shot.
Very good.
Okay.
That's what we do, Joan, we recommend to council. Oh, I did have one other thing I was going to now I remembered what it was, very quickly.
So you give Sam long enough, he'll keep us here all night. So.
No, this is very, well.
We might be breaking a record on this meeting.
This is just information. But I don't know, and you were there, so there was quite a very interesting, or no, you weren't there. This was a very interesting conversation that took place with the Planning Commission. And I thought it was, I just thought it was kind of interesting. And one of the things they talked about was the fact that we are, with the various businesses that are coming into our city, that parking is becoming a major problem. And so they talked about the fact that the distillery is coming in.
Parking has always been a problem in this city.
Well, it's getting worse. And so they're saying, the distillery is coming in, and the food place on the corner.
Yeah, they're expanding.
Noble Fish, that's
They're
correct.
expanding.
They're expanding, and there's a baker guy coming in, and he's going to be setting something up, and he's going to have X number of tables. So a lot of this is becoming not just fast food where you come in, get it, and take it out, but people coming in, sitting down, ordering, and so on. And so it was a pretty good discussion, and somebody brought up the item about parking garage, and everybody kind of said, well, no, we talked about that a long time ago, and we don't have any money, and it would cost you a fortune, and blah, 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 blah. But they had no resolution for the parking. And so I'm just throwing that out there that, planning is seeing this as becoming one of their major
Issues, yeah.
issues to deal with. And you know darn well that will fall, some of that's going to come onto the Traffic and Safety Board as issues as we go down the road. So I was just throwing it out there for information. And I make a motion to adjourn.
Well, wait.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was at that planning commission meeting, and I guess I'd like to point out that at this point, I know everybody says parking, and there will be some parking issues come up. We did a parking study. We have a perceived parking problem at this point. We don't have a parking problem. We have adequate parking. It's just that when you walk out your door, or a business owner walks out his back door to that municipal lot, it may be full. But you know what? The one on the opposite corner has plenty of parking. So it does rotate around at different times of the day. In our study, we drove every 15 minutes to each of the parking lots, took pictures, counted. There was always parking. We asked people on an online study or survey, how far were you willing to walk for free parking? 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 or more. 3 or more was the highest answer. So, if you go to Birmingham and you park in a structure, and Royal Oak just built another one, people are complaining because they have to go up in an elevator at night and they don't like it and it's scary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to go to a structure that may be far away from where you're going to shop. You've got to walk.
Mm-hmm.
So we have free parking, and right now and we just added on Main Street, 35 more spaces? Maybe those are far away for the average shopper, but you know what, there's a lot of employees that businesses are going to have to start working and saying, you're parking down there, because our customers need parking, and that is up to the business owners to impress that upon them.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at Beaumont, I had to park at Penny's at 13 and Woodward.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you're inconvenienced, you're an employee.
Yeah.
So right now, and you know what, even if we had the money and had the land and could put up a parking garage, I don't care what quadrant you put it in, the opposite one's going to say, I don't have any parking, because it's over there.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's correct, no matter what. Somebody's going to have a problem. I just thought it was very interesting that all of a sudden, the Planning Commission started talking about parking, and it was just an interesting conversation, and I thought, well, they're trying to look at the future, and, bring it up as there was a discussion about parking, and
Right,
eventually
and
it
I'm
could
going to
roll.
send all of them the parking study, which is now, it's going to be 2 years old this summer. We'll look at it again. But Noble is not adding in a lot of seats for dining. They do not want to be a dining place.
Right.
All of their options that are adding bento boxes and things are all carry-out meals. They want to still be a carry-out place.
And the other place down the street doesn't want to be a carry-out anymore. They're putting people in and having problems because they're
Oh, that's the
the
The barbecue place.
barbecue
Barbecue
place.
Oh,
place.
yeah, well, that's
yeah.
another issue.
yeah, it is.
That hopefully they'll work out with them and the
Yeah.
Church of Clawson and find some space. And again, that's going to be in the summer. I think people will walk, but again, that's another place where employees are just going to have to hoof it a little bit further.
Yeah.
So, but right now, I'll tell you, it is a perceived problem, and the more people say we have a parking problem,
Yeah.
it's just like a few years ago. Everybody said, we need to be business friendly. Well, wait, we are business friendly.
are.
You keep saying that, it makes it sound like we're not.
I know.
But for applicants that come in here to start a business, they say, wow, this is fantastic. You guys are so helpful, you know, you bend over backwards. It is that way.
Yeah.
But, so, we are watching parking, and, again, right now, it's there. It's just that, you're gonna have to walk sometimes that 3 blocks or more, and I think the biggest complaint we get is not from people coming here, shoppers and diners, it's the business owners who
It's the
say,
business owners?
we don't have any parking. Well, yeah, but you know what? Isn't that your car?
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
they like to park outside their door too.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for employees and business owners also. Just saying.
Good information.
Any other discussions?
and
Oh,
then you can
Just,
do it.
just real fast, Chief, since you're retiring at the end of this year, just want to say thank you for all the help over the past few years that we've been on this board. We appreciate it,
Well, thanks. It's been my pleasure. You guys have been a great bunch to work with.
and enjoy your retirement.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else?
No?
You can adjourn now.
Okay, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second that motion?
I almost forgot what you said.
All those in favor of motion, adjourning the meeting, say aye.
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 Okay, motion is passed. Thanks, have a good evening.
Thanks.